Hello. Good morning, everyone. Let me get rid of that. Hope you're all awesome and well. There we go. Morning. Welcome to another Wealth Coffee Chat, folks. Good to see you. Marvellous Monday. Got a few of the early birds up and at it already, so that's good to see. Morning, Chris. How are you, mate? Good to see you in the house. There's Luke. James. Tim. Howdy, folks. Howdy, team. I hope you're all well. I'll do the quick warm-ups or quick intros while things are warming up. Jason Witten's my name. Most of you know that already. But if you don't know, there you go. It's on the screen. You won't forget it. Well, maybe you will. Who knows? But welcome along. This thing we do here, Wealth Coffee Chats in the morning, 10 past 8. Weekdays usually. Well, I haven't done it on a weekend, I can tell you that one. But usually 10 past 8 in the mornings during the week. We get together and have a bit of a talk about the idea of property investing. Have a couple of coffees and, chew the fat. Talk about what is going on, ideas, pontifications, opinionations. I don't even know if that's a real word, but at the end of the day, the idea that property investing is something that takes time is the default understanding and position here at this little morning chat. And we've got to go the distance. And sometimes it takes a bit of effort to buy something really well. Don't sell it. And navigate the twists and turns of life. Anyway, there you go. Welcome along. If you're new, say hello in the chat. Give us a shout out. Let us know where you're coming in from. And, hopefully you enjoy the catch up today. We've got a fair few people already in the house. Alex, morning to you. Brendan, g'day, mate. Sonia, fantastic to have you here. David. Yes, well, sometimes when you... you can see, Brendan, that some of the what we call our number one menace when it comes to property investing, politicians and governments, can really cause a little bit of uncertainty. But today we're going to see if we can navigate a bit of that idea or, zoom out and have a look at the big picture. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about the idea of the migration of money. I've talked about this a few times. Touched on it the other night at our mentoring and coaching program. I thought I might do a little refresher on it because, it's worth understanding as we roll through and build our property portfolio. A few things to understand. If you're new to this, fantastic. If you're, a bit more experienced, then fantastic too. There's plenty of things that apply when we talk about the idea of migrating our money. And ultimately, folks, put this one in the chat for me. Ultimately, what is the financial, what's the financial outcome? The penultimate, I don't know if that's the right word, penultimate. What's the outcome? What's the destination? What's the thing that you want from your property portfolio? Yes, you want your property portfolio to grow in value. That's important. But ultimately, what is it that we are asking of our assets into the future? In the short term, it's not as important, but in the medium to long term, it's important. This is the thing that we want. We want some cash flow. You're dead right, Tim. And we want cash flow. We want income. Yep. We want some freedom and often, a comfortable life for sure. Those things are provided by assets. Now we're choosing property or maybe even a combination. And, this conversation today about the migration of money is about, tuning and tweaking that as we go. So let's dive into the chat. There's 5 ways or 5 pieces that I want to talk to you about today. And the first migration of money is the migration of location. And that is, now I've pre-drawn my Australia. They're not too bad, I reckon. One of my better cracks at it. as we go. But there's two parts to the migration of money and wealth when it comes to property, and it's location, folks. It's location. Now, number one. Yep. Thanks, Sonia. I spent hours pre-drawing that. There you go. Listen, number one, let me tell you a quick story, and a few of you have heard this. Many years ago, I purchased a property in Kalgoorlie, and I purchased it, just under $100,000. It grew to $285,000. I was pretty happy. That was a short period of time in its growth. And I had a question for that property. Would that property continue to grow, let's say from 285 to, let's say, 500? And my answer was no, it wouldn't, because the location, let's say the state and or the location and or the suburb and town was restricted and or maybe a little bit, mining related exposed. All right. So many of you know this, and if you don't, then you're hearing it for the first time. I sold that property. Way up, Jason, you sold the property? Yes, I did. There are sometimes a few reasons to do that. But by and large, folks, my idea, the easier idea these days is to buy something really well in a good spot that you want to keep forever. Now, does that always work? When we're starting out, our budgets aren't as big as we might, let's say, like them. You might want to buy a better location. You might want to buy a better property. So this is the idea of the migration of money. Over time, we do migrate our money in one way, shape, or form. All right. So the idea is I sold that property, I took some profits, and I migrated that money to a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-car garage apartment right on the water in Queensland. Okay. So that apartment now is worth, almost $900,000, $890 or something. I got the valuation the other day. So, happy days. Happy days, folks. That is one version of migration of money. Is there any properties in your portfolio that are in locations right now? And you've got to get a bit of a time frame, a bit of a runway on this. A bit of a time frame of, potentially there's an upgrade, a migration of where you started, maybe budget wise or, education wise or knowledge wise or choice wise. You purchased that property in the beginning. It's done its thing. Now what? Now what with that property? Because even with properties well located, and we'll talk about that in a minute, there comes a time where you go, okay, what do I do with it now? All right, because you want it to be in tip-top shape. So I chose to migrate my money to a location for growth and or income. Okay, much more income over there. I think it's now, I'm pretty sure it's like renting for $750 or something, $780 or something like that. So pretty happy with that. That was a good choice for me. I think it's 15 years later. I still have that property, Now, I am considering that property now in my portfolio, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the other one we talk about often, let's call this, I'll call this the CBD. Sometimes, let's say we might be further away. Let's say we're, 40K away from the CBD. And it doesn't have to be even the CBD, folks. It can be infrastructure you want to be closer to. Often the further you are away from infrastructure, the slower the rental growth. Okay, so the income. So income growth over there and capital growth was slower. And this ultimately was better and more consistent, bigger population, etc. And then the distance from the city often, or let's say beaches or jobs particularly, it's usually, folks, in and around, the income is better when you're closer to jobs. You don't have to, these days with cars and transport and, even now with work from home. So, what's the question there? is there a conversation around migrating your assets closer to infrastructure that will accelerate the income a little bit better? All right, so that's first one. So migration, either using state or suburb, linked to infrastructure and those sorts of conversations. So that's the first one as we go along. Right, here we go. The next one is the migration of a property when it's a bit old. Now, what do you do? All right. So, when your property, is 20, 30, sometimes 40 years old, what now? What happens to that property when with its income earning potential? Now, see my sad old house? Even look at this. I put some effort into these drawings for you folks this morning. There you go. What happens to that property, when it gets a bit older? Even if it is in a good location, often those properties will fall behind in their earning potential, okay? This is an interesting one, right? So the property, and let's call this the old to new. Now, there's a couple of ways to do old to new. There's a way you can, you could sell your property and then buy another one. Or what else could you do, folks? Yep, boom. Tim's already over it. Yep. Tim, I think I'm going to go on a holiday, Tim. I'll get you to run the show, I think, when I'm away. Nice work, reading my mind. You could sell, but certainly, renovate, update your property. Okay. Every property that you own will, if you want it to stay on track, value-wise, income-wise, et cetera, will need some improvement. We'll need some maintaining, and sometimes, maybe a significant update, folks, with the property. Now, depending, and it's interesting too, depending on the age of the property and its land size and what we might call the highest and best use. Let's say apartments are usually maximized when it comes to highest and best use. Townhouses sometimes aren't. You can add barbecue areas and not balconies, but decks and stuff like there. And then houses, you can add a bit more, another bedroom, et cetera, et cetera. Highest and best use of that property. That's the conversation. Highest and best use, okay? For all of your property. And this is, sometimes I like this, you buy something now that in maybe 5, 8, 10, even 15 years' time, you might maximize its value and get that pop of value, that pop of income out of that property. So, old to new. How can you do that? Either keep the property and improve it, or upgrade to a better asset. Okay, and at the end of the day, that might be really important to appreciate, depending on your situation. Certainly, these conversations, these 5 migrations of money, aren't isolated into just one thing, folks. As we go now. One of the migrations. So this is sort of your, old to new conversation here. Old to new, okay, when it comes to those things. Now, the next one is a conversation of how can we migrate our money, and it's a conversation about keeping the asset and migrating the money or the value or the wealth that's in that property, let's say, out to either buy another one or do something with. Let's say you buy a property, and you do an 80% loan. Over time, that property grows in value. Over time, your debts go down. And over here, you guys have seen this. This is where you've got a significant amount of equity. All right? And we talked about this the other night. Another way to migrate your money from the asset is keep the asset. You don't have to physically do anything to the property itself. You're not upgrading it. You're not selling it. You're not anything. You're releasing the money via equity, loan to value ratios, and borrowing. Okay. So borrowing is a really important thing to master and be able to do. And you guys heard me talk about this the other night when, going through the sort of the stages and ages in life. When you're, in your 50s, it's really important to make sure that you reset the loans, out another 30 years if you're considering retiring in the next 10 or 15. All right. So why would we do that? Even if the loans are low, even if you've only got a 20% loan to value ratio, you want access to your equity and dollars without having to be forced to sell a property and, end up with capital gains tax and other things that you might not want to do. All right. So remember, loan to value ratios, equity releases, equity locks, et cetera, et cetera. That's another way to migrate your money out of the asset into other assets, folks. The fourth way, let's quickly talk about this one, which is in, to be honest, in simple terms, gives you more options for short term. So in simple terms, let's say in the acquisition phase, and let's say in the lifestyle phase, there's some competing priorities. Okay. So in the acquisition phase, as an individual, this is like two individuals over here. As an individual, you have a varying tax rate. Okay. Tax rate. As individuals, you have a varying tax rate. You can do some, depreciation and some negative gearing and so on, which is useful for us in our PAYG world often. In acquisition and as individuals, you can borrow a little bit better. You can get sort of 90% plus. Your interest rates, are a bit lower. And there's a bit more flexibility in the acquisition stage when it comes to individuals. Okay. And there are some, tax benefits when it comes to, capital gains tax. But, at the end of the day, that is, that's really predominantly around your own home. However, over here in the lifestyle stage, there are structures, there are ways to own these properties. This is kind of like, ownership. Okay. Ownership. So, where in retirement do we have ownership that gives you potentially, a threshold of zero tax, and zero, CGT is super, right? So you might be over here using your assets using your individual capacity to purchase properties. But if you owned it in your super, then, it would be lower. Okay. So the migration potentially in the future may be, folks, and this is something you really got to talk to a financial planner about. Andy or Anthony, reach out to, the team that we recommend. And if you've got a great one, then have a conversation about them, with them. At some point, you might choose to migrate some of your money from certain types of ownership, individual ownership or other structured ownership into, more tax effective ownership. This is the company trust, company trust over here. Now that may or may not be applicable, but again, this is a certain tax, certain tax up here, and then you want to reduce the ownership longer term. If you reduce it, if the tax you pay is 30%, and then you get some of that money into your, into a better, more efficient structure, then you're making much more in the pocket money, right? That makes sense. Makes sense. I hope it makes sense to you listening in. And last but not least is the idea that, and this is kind of the culmination of what we're talking about when it comes to when we're a little bit older in life. So let's say, in retirement or whatever it might be, retirement, we might want to help, our children, our grandchildren, other people in our lives, right, through this phase. And how do we do that is a good conversation, when it comes. And when do we do that? Our assets have grown, our debts are low, and how do we, transfer or help our families in that circumstance? There's the conversation that there's, $6 trillion worth of wealth and value about to transfer over the next 20 years between age groups, which is going to be pretty interesting. So it's that conversation with the 4 pieces above that we probably need to consider as we go into the future. There you go. Anyway, quick recap on the migration of money. Hopefully it made sense or reinforce where we're at. Some things to consider as property investors. So, Wealth Coffee Chat done and dusted, folks. Thanks for hanging out. Good to see you. Join me tomorrow for another one if you're up for it. Thanks for joining. And until then, you guys take care. Bye for now.